Hello everybody, and a big welcome back to the Wee Larder channel. Today we're going to be making some delicious rhubarb and white chocolate cake bars. These are so good. So you might want to pause the video at these lovely ingredients here. And to get started, we are going to start by greasing up a brownie tin. So I'm using just a standard brownie tin for this, just with a little bit of butter all over so that the cake doesn't stick to the tin. And we're then going to start stewing our rhubarb. So I just added in a couple of extra chunks into the specified amount here as well, just because I wanted to add a little bit of rhubarb on top of the cake as well, cake bars. So you can add in a few extra pieces if you want to add some on the top of the cake as well. So we're adding our sugar in there with our rhubarb, and we're also going to add in our water as well. So a couple of tablespoons of sugar and a couple of tablespoons of water. You might only need 1 tablespoon of water, but I like to go for the 2 just so it doesn't stick to the bottom of the pan. We're going to stew that for about 15 minutes, 10-15 minutes. We don't want it too mushy, we want it still to hold some shape. So we're looking for about a medium simmer, so it should look something like this. Excuse the steamy lens on my camera there. So we're going to make the cake now. We're going to set our rhubarb to the side to cool. We're going to cream our butter and sugar in together. So I've got the big KitchenAid out today. It was really good to get this back on the go. So we're going to get that cream together like so. So once that is nice and creamy, we're then going to add in our flour. So I did sieve this as well into the bowl. And you might notice my little toddler walking around in the background there as well. So we've added our baking powder in there too, and we've also added in our ground almonds. She absolutely loves it when I am baking cakes, as you can imagine. And we're just going to give that a wee stir through, and we're then going to add in our eggs. It sounds quite excessive, 5 eggs, but it does actually make this cake really, really delicious. And we're just going to give that a wee mix through there. So we're just going to pause there and just make sure we've scraped everything down off the side of the bowl. I think I might need to readjust my KitchenAid a little bit because it was slightly not mixing everything properly from the sides or like the bottom, and we're just going to give that a good mix through again. So just make sure everything is well blended. We're then going to add in our rhubarb. So I did actually drain it from the pan because there was a little bit of water there that I didn't want to add all the water into the cake. A little bit still went in, but if you could drain it, that would be great. And we're going to add in our chocolate as well. So you can see I've chopped it quite chunky because you want it to kind of, you want to sort of be able to taste the little chocolate pieces. They do melt into the sponge, but if you have them quite chunky, you can still taste them really well. We're just going to give that a wee blend through because we don't want to blend the rhubarb too much in our cake bar. And we're just going to scrape it off of the mixer like so. We're then going to pop this into the oven. So you want to set your oven at 160. So you want to get that preheated, and we're then going to pop this into our dish. So I've just added another piece of greaseproof paper on top of my greased butter just so I can lift it out completely. You don't have to do this, but I just find that it just stops the cake from sticking. I also greased up this sheet of greaseproof paper as well with a little bit of butter, so I just find it just stops it sticking completely. So we're just going to spread that out into all the corners. You could probably put your greaseproof paper on your tray a little bit neater than me. And we're going to sprinkle a little bit of extra chocolate on the top there as well. If you don't have extra, don't worry, you don't have to add this on. But I just think it's nice to have a little bit of melted chocolate on the top of the cake bar too. And it should look something like so. So we're going to pop it into the oven for about 30 to 40 minutes. Just make sure that it is cooked right through in the middle. If it's not, pop it in for another 5 to 10 minutes. Just poke a little cake stick through the middle and it should come out completely clean. So it should be nice and firm to touch on the top, and we're going to leave that to cool, and we're then going to take it out of the tray and pop it onto a cooling rack as well once it is cooled also. So I've put the greaseproof paper underneath the cooling rack just because we're going to ice this cake, so it just makes it a little bit easier. So we're going to leave that to cool completely before we ice the cake. So once it is nice and cool, I've popped it onto the greaseproof that I saved, and we're just going to carve out our cake bars. So you can make them like any shape that you want to. You could make them like thinner than I have here, but I've made them more of like a square sort of shape. I just thought the size was quite a good size for what I was doing with this cake, but you could make them a little bit smaller if you were giving them to the kids or something as well. My kids are quite a bit older, so they like a big piece of cake. So you can see this cake is nice and soft and it's cooked through. The rhubarb has blended in nicely, and you can see a few little pieces of white chocolate in there as well. So I'm just separating all the pieces of cake because we're going to add a little bit of icing on. Now you could actually just leave the cake as it is just now. You don't need to add icing onto the top. But we like a little bit of icing on ours. So we're going to add the extra pieces of stewed rhubarb on the top there. If you did add in a few extra pieces into your pan that you kept back, then you can add that on here. If you don't have extra stewed rhubarb, don't worry. You don't need to add it onto your cake. Your cake could be eaten just as it is before you do this. But I just think it looks lovely and pink and pretty when you do this. Now you could drizzle over melted chocolate, but I've actually just used a little bit of icing sugar and water because I'd actually run out of white chocolate. But white chocolate would have worked really well on here as well. And you should have something that looks a little bit like this when you're finished. So it's nice and soft and nice and sweet on the top. I absolutely love this recipe. It is such a treat, and it's delicious served with warm custard as well. So if you have a few bits that are kind of going a bit stale, if it's been sitting around the kitchen for a while, don't throw them away, pop them in the oven, warm them up and serve them with warm custard. So I hope you enjoyed this recipe. If you did, please feel free to give it a big thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed, if you click that subscribe button and the little bell next to it, I will see you guys again soon. So take care, lots of love, bye bye.